We are back working on our 93 GMC Jimmy. We are throwing Jeep axles underneath to turn it into a more capable off-road machine. Now, if you tuned in for the last episode, we got all that IFS front end torched and ripped out of there down to just about the frame. The rear axle is out using the factory leaf springs, doing a leaf over with that Jeep Dana 35. Regardless of which direction I end up going with my gear issue in the rear axle, I do have to mount shocks, and I'm feeling pretty confident on where my spring perches are set up. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and burn those in and get started on that. Now, my shock on the factory was originally on the U-bolt plate, which I thought about just flipping these around from each side and putting them on top and then remounting my shock back to that, which would have worked fine, but moving it to the top of that leaf spring and looking at my shock angle, I'm not super stoked on it. I think what my initial plan is gonna be is I'm gonna find a good center point on my leaf perch, weld that bad girl in place, so I've got some room from my axle, call it good. If it don't work, it don't work. All right, well, we're letting that rear end cool down just a little bit, and we'll probably throw a little paint on it too to kind of finish it up. But before we get to that, I got a ton of work left in the front just to get the last of these brackets that are hanging onto the frame cut off of there, and then we got to clean all that up, grind it up, and then I also got to get a game plan on how I want to set up coil spring buckets in the front if that is the route we're going. That is the route I do want to go. Let's get everything off, reassess it, and make sure we're looking good to make that happen. Got that rear axle all painted up, should be dry, even though it's super cold out here. But let's go ahead and start wheeling it underneath this Jimmy, seeing if all of our measurements and everything worked out, and then we'll keep plugging away on the front end because we got a ton of work to get done in the front end. Get that frame cleaned up and get this front axle housing in there, mocked up, and hopefully get this thing on the trail someday, soon. That is a nice fit. I like it. So one thing I gotta fix is I plan on reusing these plates, my U-bolt plates, and I'll probably just cut the bolt off of the plate for now. But this one is seized inside of the shock, so I need to get this one off, and then I will trim the hardware off of there, just reuse them for now. Probably change it down the road, but not right now. Well, unfortunately, I took the sleeve with it, but that's okay. At least it's more exposed now, and I can probably get that off of there. Okay, so a couple problems I'm running into already with my shocks. And this could have easily been avoided if I would have taken 2 seconds to kind of mock stuff up. But the mounts that I thought were such a great idea not good. See that where the shock was mounted originally, it's actually inboarded towards the inside quite a bit. Where I put mine on the spring perch, it's bringing it in probably a good inch, inch and a half. Now my shock went from straight up and down to when I push it over like this, I got an angle here, straight bolt there. You get the big picture. So that's not gonna work. I do have some shock mounts that are laying around in the garage. Not a big deal. We'll change it up a little bit. You're gonna run into these things, but definitely my bad. I could have easily taken a step back, looked at the big picture, and seen that this wasn't gonna work. Whatever, we're changing it, we'll get it fixed. Okay, here's our factory shocks out of the Jimmy, which clearly weren't gonna work with doing that leaf under, adding quite a bit of lift, probably 4 to 5 inches. I've got these out, but I still am gonna use the factory shock locations on the frame. And then I've got some new shock tabs welded on the back of that rear axle, which is gonna locate that shock exactly where we want it and give it a good ride angle. So now that these are out, I can measure ride heights and full droop lengths. We'll get some shocks ordered up and get them slapped in there, easy peasy. The rear of the Jimmy is cruising right along, but we have got a lot to tackle in this front end. So let's get started cleaning everything up. I've got a rough idea in my head that I'll show you guys for what I want to do for the cross member. Probably eliminating the factory transmission cross member. Gonna build a new transmission cross member under there and add my radius arm links into it. And I'd like to set them up in there, but we'll get to that when we get to it. Think it's a good plan, but let's strip this front end down and get it buffed down to bare metal and get a really good idea where we want to start locating some of these brackets. We could even get this front axle slid under here and start taking some measurements. Okay, now that the front frame rails are all buffed down and looking nice and shiny and clean, it's time for us to get this front axle off the stand and wheel it underneath the front of that GMC. Then once we've got it down underneath the front end, I can start to take some measurements and see the big picture. Where do we want that axle to sit? Are our spring perches gonna be where we need them to be? All that good stuff. So let's get started with the daunting task of getting that axle off the axle stand and bringing it over here. Success. Okay, now that the front end is kind of hanging out underneath of there, I'm kind of spitballing an idea here for my cross member. I'm gonna remove the factory cross member, which that has to be changed regardless because that front driveline was built for IFS, so straight across. So that being said, the factory cross member is right below that driveline, not gonna allow it to flex, which we needed to, so had to be changed anyways. Now I've got some random scrap metal laying around, and one of those pieces is actually a rear cross member out of a Jeep that I might cut down and try to make that work. But I'm gonna start laying some pieces on these, taking some measurements, sizing things up. Maybe I can get the gears turning and a light bulb will go off on what I wanna do and how I wanna set it up. Okay, factory cross member is out. So now I got a rough idea of what I gotta do for my transmission mount, how wide it is that I need to have. And we'll go from there. I'm moving right along with my cross member / link mounts, but I don't want to do too much welding and grinding inside of here because it's cold outside and I'd have to open all the doors, blah, blah, blah. Also, I like to let the creative juices flow for a minute and make sure I'm not missing something or there's a better idea. So to keep things rolling, I'm gonna move back to my rear axle and start tidying up some of the little long, daunting tasks that still need to be finished up. One big one is our brake line. This rear axle didn't have any brake lines on it when we got it, so I have to make all new brake lines for the rear, as well as make a longer braided brake line fit the original factory hard line off the frame down to the axle. So I'm whipping up a couple little brackets. I gotta bend some brake lines up and make those all fit. So a lot of work. Let's get cruising. Okay, I have picked up an assortment of fittings because I am missing my vent tube or the nipple on the rear axle for the vent tube. That's missing, and I don't know what size it is. So I picked up a few different sizes, and then I also got a couple adapters because our brake line is for a Jeep Cherokee, so it fits the lines that we made for the rear axle, but it's not fitting the 1/4-inch factory line. Think I'll be able to make it work now that I've got that. So hopefully we can button these last couple things up, throw that diff cover on there that we crudely spray painted, and the rear end will be just about there, maybe minus shocks. Now, a regular guy would probably just go get some new drums because these are looking pretty rough, but I'm not just any regular guy. Brakes are for sissies. Best looking brake lines ever? Probably not. I can never get those perfect. But right now she's sitting at full droop and we brought her all the way up to ride height. I'm just getting some measurements for our rear shocks, and I'm also making sure that our brake lines as well as our vent tube and my e-brake cables that I've sorta got hooked up. Making sure all that looks good and nothing's kind of hanging up. Maybe we'll flex her a little up and down too. And the ride height might change a little bit. So I can't be for sure on these measurements quite yet, but I'd say it's pretty close. Not a super impressive amount of flex in the rear axle, but these are just the factory leaf springs. So I didn't expect to be blown away by the travel in these things. We can upgrade that later. But right now, this will work good to get us back on the road, get us on the trail and see what we want to do differently.
Perfect.
Okay, all right. This is my repurposed cross member. Super simple. I put some angle iron. I'm kind of mimicking the factory cross member that hooked onto the top of the frame and then bolted onto the inside of the frame. I think it's gonna work out okay. This is just a rear cross member that I had laying out back with a hitch still on it from like a Jeep Wrangler. I cut it down, threw some metal on her, and then since my bolts are now gonna be on the inside of this cross member rather than on the outside of it, I welded my nuts on the inside of that plate. That way I can run my bolts through the frame directly into this. Should make installation fairly simple, a little bit better. Okay, going on a little late night road trip. Been on the hunt for some wheels and tires for this thing for a while. Don't really want to spend new price, but as far as the market's concerned, everybody wants about new price for their old worn out tires. So I've been looking for a little while now, and I think I just found a set. They look like they're in pretty good shape. They're not exactly what we wanted, but for the price, I'm gonna go get them. I'm gonna make them work. Because it is killing me trying to set this thing up without a set of tires to mock some stuff up with. And I would do a set of rollers, but that would cost me a whole lot of money these days. The days of $100 sets of rollers are gone. So we'll go check these out. I think these are gonna work pretty good. Okay guys, not gonna lie, it's a little skeptical on these wheels and tires, but I think they look kind of sick. I don't even know what kind of wheels these are, and they are just an AT, but they're a good brand. I think they're gonna pan out. These are kind of cool. Okay, I am super excited for these, and for more than one reason. First off, they look way better in person than I thought they were gonna look. For some reason, photos weren't doing it for me, but once I see them in person, they look sweet. Second off, this is the first time that I'm able to roll the potential size of tire next to this thing and see what it looks like. And third, our rear axle is for the most part done. So realistically, I can bolt these on and actually see what my clearance is looking like, how much trimming I gotta do, or if I gotta make a sacrifice on tire size, depending on how big I wanna go. I wanna keep it low, but let's see, I'm excited. I don't know the exact width of these wheels, but I do know the tires are a 35 by 11.5. Being that these are 6 inches wider than the factory width that originally was on the Jimmy, I was willing to take the risk on going a little bit more narrow of a wheel and tire combo because I didn't think it would look that bad. I think it looks pretty good, and it's kind of growing on me the more I look at it. It doesn't look crazy wide. It almost just kind of looks like a well put together machine. But right now, I'm kind of digging it.